Good morning, good afternoon, good evening guys, gals and gentlepods, and welcome back to the shed, the workshop. We're back on Morty. She's still in surgery. So in the last video I repaired the hole in the boot floor on the driver's side, plated over where the fuel filler neck comes through, and did the chassis rail on the passenger side for the rear spring hanger. If you recall, at the end of that one I discovered some fairly serious corrosion just above it. It's actually quite a bit worse than I'd hoped. Come here and have a look. Right, so as you can see, there's the new section of chassis that I welded in. The flange above it is okay, but where it was welded to the floor had rotted out. This plate had been put in beforehand by whoever did whatever work in the past. Strangely, they've welded it to the flange of the chassis there, they've welded it to the back of the wheel arch there, they've welded it to the bottom of the outer wing. They didn't bother welding it to the floor. This was the other part of it, and it was glued down, if you recall, with a mixture of silicone and body filler and dog snot and God knows what else. So I've cut that piece off to reveal the corrosion. Now initially I cut out the rot and left that piece in, but then I spotted that in this corner it had got a hole and it's paper thin, and it would be quite difficult to form that shape by hand and cut a patch into that corner, and I'd rather, if I can, do this whole area in one plate. So I bit the bullet and I've cut that piece out of the floor as well, and it's now time for some CAD work. That's cardboard aided design. So I've made this cardboard template that is a good fit for there, so that will cover the holes. This bit can be folded down on that edge and welded. It can be welded around there. I've marked that I need to extend it by 60mm that way to finish covering that, and I marked that I need to go 50mm further in that way on the radius to match up to the corner of the wheel arch. There is, the bottom edge of the wheel arch has gone there, so I'll patch that from the wheel arch side. Although actually what I might do is, once I've got this in, once I've got this plate welded in, just put a little angle plate just up around that corner just to reinforce that. Right, so that's the template. Let's transfer that to some metal. Right, so here's my sheet of steel. Now I know that I want to go 50mm there, so that's fine. Line up this edge to the edge of the sheet of steel and put some clamps on it to hold it in place. Lay that out flat, pop a magnet on there, and then I've got a big magnet that'll go on there, and that'll hold that down nice and flat. And then I can simply draw around the template with a pencil. You could use a Sharpie, you could use a scriber, but I find a pencil works quite well, and it's easily seen. It's certainly a bit easier to see sometimes than a scriber mark. Now I've also noted that I need to go 60mm further that way. That's there, which is 110mm from that edge, so I'll just mark that, 110. draw a line across there, and then just straight edge that. Straight edge that. And there we go. I didn't do the extension there. Not a problem. Pop that back on. Put that magnet on in place. Now what I did do is draw a line here, which is the line that this side of it wants to take. Like so. And then this side needs to follow that curve around. So I'll rough that in by hand. What I'll do when I cut it is I'll cut that a little bit wide. I can always trim it back. Difficult to add metal in, easy to cut it off. Right, let's get that cut out. So I've now cut out my basic plate and trimmed it to suit the edge of the wheel arch, and there's the plate. You're looking at it from upside down now. What I've done is I've laid it in place, clamped it in position, and then from underneath just drawn around the edge of where the cuts are, because I've got this tool, which is a joddler, and what that will do is give it a 1mm step raised edge. So if I show you on a piece of scrap, so you can see there, and then that will overlap, and I can weld along there, and then from underneath I can weld along there, and that is a really nice strong joint there. But it's only 10mm step, that joddle, so I don't really want any more metal than 10mm from the edge of the cuts, so that the step goes down into the cuts. So I've marked out 10mm from the edge of the cuts, marked my lines out, so I just need to trim them off, and then I can do the joddle just along there, there, and there, and then that should fit in nicely, ready for welding. Some people, if you've watched any other videos of vehicle restoration and repair work, welding work, you'll see them using disc cutters and angle grinders to cut sheet steel, which is fine. I don't like to do it because I find it very messy. Get a lot of grinding dust and sparks flying. On the subject of sparks flying when you're grinding, be very careful when you're grinding or doing anything that causes sparks, welding, in the vehicle, because those sparks are very hot and they're travelling very fast, especially from grinding. If they hit glass, they will burn into it and leave you with lumps, small spots on the surface of the glass you can't get rid of. So just be aware and be careful of that. Sometimes difficult to get the cut started when you've got a very fine edge like that. It's fold it over on me. So we do this cut first. Right. That's it. Trim that up, and then we're just going off of that in quickly and see how that sits. Make sure it overlaps metal everywhere so we can weld it, and then we'll get on and joddle it. Sometimes it helps to just go back over what you've done. And that's not bad, that's giving me a nice edge. There's a bit of a ripple there. This is where I trim that with the snips. True that up, that's not bad. A little bit along there. And that radius will just be folded down into the spare wheel well in the boot and welded along the edge. And that's about ready to go in. One more little detail I nearly forgot to mention. The joddler is a double-ended tool. That's the joddle edge, and this one is a punching tool. So this punches a hole in the edge. So I've done a series of holes down there so I can plug weld through there onto the top of the original chassis rail, and along this back edge I want to do the same. So about every inch, 25 mil or so. But then I can just go along and plug weld those, because that sits on a flange at the back edge of the boot floor. I don't really want to weld along that edge because that is the outer skin of the vehicle. Right, so after a little bit of time cutting and shaping, and those are the holes I punched. I've drilled these holes because obviously the hole punch wouldn't reach to there. So I've marked out where the top of that chassis rail is, the flange, and drilled a series of 5mm holes so I can plug weld through onto the flange of the chassis, and then from underneath I'll seam weld along the edge as well. All this will be seam welded all round. That's the joddled edge, so that steps nicely onto the floor, and then I can weld along the inner edge of that from underneath as well, so that will be absolutely rock solid strong. And when all of that welding is finished, and along here and down there as much as I can, then this edge will just be folded over into that lip of the spare wheel well. So let's get to it. See you in a little while. Right, so that's the major part of that welded in from the top. There's a bit more work to do down in that corner. Need to put a strip around there and finish welding this from underneath, and then that's good to go. And I've got to get a bit of weld along there, but I think I've had enough for today, so that'll do, and we'll crack on with it another day.